cold wind howled through the fjords, carrying with it the scent of salt and the distant echoes of war cries that once filled the air. Erik Thorsson stood on the edge of a jagged cliff, his piercing blue eyes scanning the restless sea. He was the last of his kind, the final Viking warrior of a once mighty clan. The raids had stopped, the great longships lay rotting in their moorings, and the old gods had fallen silent. But Erik still lived, and as long as he drew breath, he would not let his people be forgotten. The firelight flickered in the small wooden hut where he took shelter. His hands, scarred from years of battle, traced the runes carved into his axe's handle. Each mark told a story, a life taken, a victory won, a brother lost. The world was changing. The Christian kings had outlawed the old ways, and Erik had watched his kinsmen either bend the knee or perish under the sword. He had chosen neither. Instead, he fled deep into the northern wilderness, where the gods still whispered in the rustling leaves and roaring storms. Winter had come early this year. Snow blanketed the land, muffling every sound and forcing Erik to hunt sparingly. He survived on what little he could catch, hares, the occasional deer, and dried fish from his last raid. His body, though aged and weary, remained strong. He knew it was only a matter of time before the king's men would come for him. They would not suffer a Viking to live, especially one who refused to kneel. One evening, as Erik skinned a hare by the fire, he heard the faint crunch of snow beyond the trees. His grip tightened on his axe, and he moved swiftly, pressing his back against the wooden wall of his hut. The sound came again, calculated, deliberate. Someone was approaching. Erik had spent years in isolation, but his instincts were as sharp as ever. He peered through the shadows and saw a hooded figure step into the clearing. The stranger was tall and moved with a warrior's grace. Erik stepped forward, his axe raised. "Who goes there?" His voice was rough from years of silence. The figure hesitated before pushing back the hood. Beneath it was a woman, her auburn hair braided in the old way, her green eyes alight with determination. "I am Freya Bjornsdottir," she said. "I have come for you." Erik did not lower his weapon. "And why should I not cut you down where you stand?" Freya took a step closer. "Because the blood of the gods still runs through your veins, and the time for hiding is over." He studied her face. She was young but bore the scars of battle. He saw no fear in her eyes, only purpose. "What do you want from me?" "To fight," she said simply. "There are others scattered across the land. We are gathering in the east. The Christian king grows complacent, believing us all but gone. But we are not gone, and we will remind him of that." Erik's grip on his axe faltered for the first time in years. He had long accepted his solitude, believing himself to be the last. The idea that others still held the old ways stirred something deep within him. Yet he had seen what had become of the warriors who resisted, bodies burned, children slaughtered, history erased. "I have spent years running from the fate that awaits all of us," he said. "What makes you think we can change it?" Freya stepped closer, her voice fierce. "Because the gods do not favor cowards, and neither do I." For a long moment, Erik said nothing. Then, without a word, he turned back to his hut. He reached for his armor, untouched for years but still gleaming under the firelight. He fastened his belt, secured his axe, and looked at Freya with renewed purpose. "Then we leave at dawn." The journey east was treacherous. They traveled by night, avoiding patrols of the king's men. Freya led him through hidden paths and frozen rivers, where the ice groaned under their weight. Along the way, they met others, men and women who had once been warriors, now reduced to mere shadows of their former selves. Erik saw their hunger, their desperation, but also their fire. They were not many, but they were enough. At last, they reached the hidden camp nestled deep within the mountains. Fires burned in the cold night, and warriors sharpened their swords, the air thick with the promise of battle. Erik felt something stir in his chest. Pride, perhaps, or the ghost of a long-dead dream. Freya stood before the gathered warriors. The king believes us finished. He believes we will fade into history without a fight. But he is wrong. We are Vikings. We are the storm, the fury of the gods made flesh. And tomorrow, we remind them why they once feared our name. A roar erupted from the crowd, weapons raised high. Erik clenched his axe, feeling the weight of destiny settle upon his shoulders. He was the last Viking no more. He was one among many, and they would fight until the end. Dawn broke with a crimson sky as they descended upon the village where the king's forces had made camp. Erik led the charge, his axe swinging with the force of years of suppressed rage. The battle was swift and brutal. Shields splintered, swords clashed, and blood stained the snow. Erik fought like a man possessed, his body moving with the grace of a wolf. He cut down the soldiers one by one, their shouts turning to screams. But he was only one man, and even the mightiest warriors fall. A blade pierced his side, and he staggered. The world blurred, but he refused to fall. Then he saw Freya, locked in combat with a towering knight. With the last of his strength, Erik surged forward, his axe cleaving through the enemy's helm. The knight fell, and Freya turned to him, eyes wide with horror. "Erik!" He dropped to his knees, the snow crimson beneath him. The sounds of battle faded, replaced by the distant cries of ravens. Freya knelt beside him, pressing a hand to his wound. "Stay with me," she pleaded. Erik smiled, the pain dulling into something almost peaceful. "You will carry our name forward," he said. "The gods, they favor the brave." With his final breath, he looked to the sky, where the Valkyries waited. The last Viking had fallen, but his legacy would live on.